This is your host Swapnil Bhartiya, and welcome to another episode of TFiR Let's Talk. And today we have with us Sathya Sankaran, General Manager of CloudCasa by Catalogic. Satya, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Swapnil. Thanks for having me back.
KubeCon and CloudCon is almost around the corner. We saw each other in Valencia, and now we'll be seeing each other again in Detroit. Talk a bit about what are some of the key announcements that you folks will be making at the upcoming event.
Yeah, no, awesome. Look, this has been a fantastic emerging community for this entire ecosystem, and KubeCon is a great showcase of all the progress that is going on. In fact, it's one of the few ecosystems where you do two major conferences a year, split by about 6 months time frame, because there is so much going on in this ecosystem, right? So keeping up with this ecosystem in itself is a challenge, and we're certainly up to it. So to give you some context on what we do, we basically are addressing problems that are more day two challenges within Kubernetes ecosystem, right? So backup, DR, cloud mobility, security, these are all pieces that people don't think about it on day one, but once you've got something running on production, you do need to consider these problems that we have to address. And to recap what we had done in the last KubeCon, we kind of brought in this concept of cyber resilience, right? Because security is everyone's job. Even though we're a backup and restore provider, we certainly want to be cognizant of what data we are protecting and whether that data is good data. So in KubeCon Valencia, a lot of our announcements were about establishing cyber resilience, basically doing security scans along with your backups, and also expanding our footprint into AKS. That's actually been a fantastic addition for us. We've added a few customers that are using Azure Kubernetes service. We've learned a lot from them. We've added features. In fact, one of our last recording was actually around, how we are delivering a solution for Azure Kubernetes. But the theme here is to basically listen to what the market was saying and the market feedback, right? And this is a GKE report that came in towards the end of last year. And it pointed out some things in our solution that we didn't have back then, mainly around RBAC capabilities, which we addressed in the KubeCon Valencia. There is also there is this notion that, hey, you guys are doing fantastic things with EKS and AWS, but you kind of need to do the same thing with Azure and Google Cloud as well, and also enable a lot of cross-cluster, cross-cloud recoveries in here. So this is really what we took to heart. In the last KubeCon, we talked about how we are doing RBAC and Azure Kubernetes service integration. And in this KubeCon, you can kind of fill in the blanks here from this report. We are going to be presenting about GKE native integration, as well as cross-cloud, cross-cluster recovery between these platforms. And so the announcements are around making recoveries a lot easier. We're also making sure that one of the biggest objections we face as a SaaS provider is, how do I keep my backup data private? So we're adding private link capability and also support for private clusters and dark clusters, and also dealing with when you support multiple cloud providers, there are some unique quirks that we have to address. We're dealing with those quirks and adding support for the missing gaps in each of these cloud platforms as well. And we're going to be showing this all at the KubeCon in Detroit.
You folks have been adding support for all three major public cloud providers. Talk a bit about why does integrating CloudCasa with cloud providers matters to users of AKS, EKS, and GKE.
The best way I can explain today is certainly all these applications are kind of being born in the cloud, right? Today, most of Kubernetes applications, the default thought process is, okay, let's put it in the cloud, and only when some requirements are not being met, it gets moved to on-prem. In fact, the CNCF survey in 2021, a year ago, which I actually anticipate would mean an understatement based on the trends, indicates that 79% of Kubernetes users deploy or use managed or hosted Kubernetes. That's a staggering number. This tells you where the data is currently at right now. And even in that group, you saw, I mean, if you looked at what storage they're using, it's a great proxy to what platforms they're using. And you're seeing a strong interest in EKS, AKS, and GKE across these platforms. Again, things that you probably already knew, but it's always nice to put a number to those assumptions through these large-scale surveys that CNCF has been great at doing. So this means more of your data is sitting in the cloud today when it comes to Kubernetes. And that means we have to optimize our experience with these cloud providers. So what are some of the things that we try to optimize for? First, I think the biggest problem, and we've talked about security first approach in other conversations as well, is you can't be sharing your cloud credentials across all your Kubernetes clusters. You don't want to be distributing your credentials across these clusters. And that's a very poor way of designing and running a solution. We rely on the best practices that these cloud providers offer, whether it's CloudFormation templates, whether it's an Azure Resource Manager, whether it's Google's templates. We basically utilize these capabilities and essentially create a role within your cloud provider account where you can actually monitor everything we're doing, and you can actually control what we can and cannot do, or whether we can continue to have access or not. You can't go to 50 clusters and change your access all of a sudden when you have a single role that you can monitor and control. So it starts with security first. It's also about fast onboarding. By talking to the cloud providers directly, you can get a list of all of your clusters in one place. So why go to each cluster and do backups? When you can go to the cloud provider and get a listing of all of your customers, you can automate the whole process. That's what we do with our solution. You can do your first backup in under 10 minutes, and you can actually set up multiple clusters being backed up within the first 10 minutes by actually integrating directly with your cloud account. And then you have multiple account management scenario. I think there is a telco provider we're doing a POC with, and they say they have over 100 cloud accounts, and they couldn't even tell us how many clusters they're running in those cloud accounts because there's no centralized inventory. So they had an estimate, and they had over 100 cloud accounts. This tells you there is a place and a solution and a problem you need to manage where you're managing all of these clusters in one place across all of these cloud accounts, and in some cases, it's even across cloud providers, right? So you want to manage all of that in one place, and that's something we do. And the most important piece, recovery. By knowing how your clusters are configured, we can help spin up these clusters very, very quickly within cloud provider. And in a lot of circumstances, we can actually do it cross cloud provider as well. So you could back up an EKS cluster and restore it in AKS cluster, and we can handle node port storage classes, sizing and scaling information when we do that. And that's only possible because we integrate with the cloud provider. And finally, just know all these cloud providers have their own unique quirks. They're all the same, but they're not the same. There are enough differences that you don't want to be handling it with your homegrown scripting solutions. Let us deal with those quirks, and we do across these platforms, and that allows us to support our customers and achieve platform parity across all these cloud providers.
Excellent. Thanks. Can you talk about what are some of the main pain points associated with recovering or migrating Kubernetes clusters and their data?
The restore process in Kubernetes is kind of taken a step back. It reminds me of the days when we did not have bare metal recovery. We did not have instant virtualization, instant access capabilities in the industry, right? And the reason for that is how much data are you capturing, and how are you able to leverage that data set in your backup and restore process? So let me walk you through a very standard backup and restore process. What happens here is we're capturing all of this information, and all solutions, including us a year ago, we were only capturing the resource data and the PVs, and that meant we can bring back the resource data and PVs. But what about the cluster? The cluster information is not at all captured, which means that you're not spinning up a new cluster. The customer is responsible for spinning up a new cluster, setting up credentials, setting up networking, installing an agent, configuring the backup target before the first byte of data gets transferred. How is this addressed by customers? And a lot of them basically run a standby and a recovery cluster in cloud. But those standby clusters and recovery clusters are charging, causing you to rack up some cloud bills as well. So this process is very manual and error prone, and it is operated under a very high anxiety situation. You're already under a lot of pressure to bring up your data set if it's down, and you're being forced to perform a very slow, complex manual process at a time where your blood pressure is not your best buddy, right? And that's really what CloudCasa tries to do better at. And we're so proud that we're making life easier for the DevOps folks. We actually capture how the cluster is configured in your cloud providers, or it could be AKS, EKS, GKE. We query and integrate with them directly and catalog how that cluster is backed up. So it starts with data capture. But once the data is captured, we can now spin up that same cluster during recovery with the same settings that we captured from your original backup. So we can either simply preserve and translate those options between these cloud providers and spin up a cluster, or we can allow you to map those options to new options when you spin up a new cluster. An example, if you want to spin up a new cluster, you may not want your test servers or staging servers to be as powerful as your production server. So you may want to use a smaller setup, and that's something you can do. You may want to turn off auto scaling, and that's something you could do as part of this transformation. We simply allow you to back up the existing cluster, restore it, and allow you to customize how you spin up that cluster. And this process delivers a smooth experience, doesn't require the human touch at a time of high anxiety. And because we do this, the first byte gets transferred a whole lot sooner. Within minutes of kicking off a restore job, you're actually starting to restore because we spin up the cluster automatically. We install the agent automatically. We get the agent to start doing the restore and pulling data inside. And that's smooth, fast, and high confidence results that you can get out of our Any2Cloud recovery capabilities.
You did touch upon that in your answer, but I would really appreciate if you can explain further how the Any2Cloud recovery feature works and why is it unique to CloudCasa.
With Any2Cloud recovery, Swapnil, you have essentially dissimilar environments. You have a source environment that could be anywhere. It could be an on-prem cluster. That could be a cluster running in your primary cloud provider of choice. And now you want to actually restore that to a different environment. It could be a new account in the same cloud provider. It could be on-prem to a cloud provider. It could be EKS to AKS or vice versa. It could be to a completely different cloud provider. And with this comes a new set of challenges that you have to work through. How do you translate this cluster creation process? You've got different settings, and I think each of these cloud providers have different number of settings that you could choose. I think GKE has the most number of options, EKS has the least number of options, and I think AKS is kind of somewhere in the middle. So how do we translate these capabilities? So this is something that we don't want a user to be doing when you are going through a recovery. You don't want to be learning about what options exist here versus there and try to map in a stressful scenario. We do that translation for you. In some cases, the translation is not possible. You can't just translate this option to another option because that option may not exist, or there is no equivalent options. In those cases, we allow a user to map those capabilities. For example, when you're bringing it back on a new cluster, you want to be able to select what network you're bringing up in. You want to choose what storage classes you're going to be using. You want to be able to say what happens to your node port applications. Do you want to dynamically ask for new node ports, or do you want to preserve existing node ports? These are all things that are handled by our solution so that a customer doesn't have to make those calls when the data is not available to them.
Now that you are natively integrated with the top three cloud providers, do you have a favorite? Are you ready to pick a favorite, or do you think that they all offer same kind of value to their users? Because in the multi-cloud hybrid cloud world, folks leverage different cloud providers for different workloads.
My favorite is the cloud provider that brings us the most customers. Uh, um, and yeah, no, look, between these cloud providers, a lot of core functionalities remain the same. So they are more alike than different, to be perfectly honest. A lot of people don't choose a cloud provider for one specific workload, right? So you're choosing EKS, or choosing AKS, or choosing GKE because you're looking at it more holistically. A lot of the times it's the platform you've chosen for some other application, but once you've chosen one platform, you're trying to use pretty much all of the capabilities that that platform provides for you, even for other applications you're using. So there are, again, differences between these three, but probably not enough to change out your provider. But certainly, when you're looking at something new, you can look at the strengths of each solution. We have identified some unique quirks across these solutions. For example, in AKS, we talked about the fact that you have this concept called Azure Files. It's a file storage, and within that file storage, you can perform snapshots, but you actually have to use your Azure portal to be able to do restores. In the world of Kubernetes, trying to do something manual and selling that to a customer is not tolerated very well. So we've had to actually build some capabilities to support Azure File CSI driver natively. It's the same thing with all providers offer a native storage capabilities that are not CSI compliant. And again, remember that CSI was default only a few months ago in some of these providers. So that means there is still a lot of workloads that are using native entry volumes, and we need to provide support for that as well. And we've actually added those capabilities. GKE has a concept called private cluster that seems to be very popular. What that makes sure is the control plane of the cluster does not carry a public endpoint. And that brought itself a little bit of a complexity that we had to address, and we address. I think what is the goal? I think we want our customers to choose the best cloud provider that they can pick for their requirements. What we want to deliver is a uniform experience across all three providers. And if there are quirks, let us handle those quirks. If you're using multiple providers, don't try to script one set of solution for one provider and you have to make a whole bunch of modifications to make that thing work on another provider. That's the value we as an ecosystem player provide. We will handle that complexity so you can deal with and deliver a uniform experience for your DevOps folks with our solution.
Now let's go back to KubeCon and CloudEduCon and tell us a bit about what activities you have planned at your booth for the attendees, why people should come and visit your booth. Of course, there is so much to see and learn at your booth, and all the offering that you have from CloudCasa, but I'm also aware of something exciting that you folks are planning for this event.
We're super excited to see the community in general. KubeCon Valencia was awesome. It was great to see 7,000 people turn up. I thought it was long gone that such gatherings were going to be possible, but KubeCon showed kind of the resilience in that community in Valencia. We're actually expecting a bigger crowd in KubeCon Detroit, and we'll be there in full force. It's happening in US where we are headquartered in, so we've got more people coming in for this KubeCon than even in Valencia. And if you are there at the show, definitely stop by. I can give you a number of reasons why you should stop by our booth. First, as we talked about, seeing is believing, and it's also a picture is worth 1,000 words. With our accents, sometimes it's worth a whole lot more. So do stop by our booths. We are running live demos of all of these features. So any feature, any questions, we're happy to address your questions. And even if you're not interested in the product and you're simply just dealing with, challenges in this ecosystem, we're going to be there to address them at the show. Second, there will be some children-friendly swag. I know we all collect swag for our children, and almost never for personal use. And we will have some children-friendly swag at our booth. We're going to be actually having more developers in the booth than sales and marketing folks. I think it's a testament to the quality of conversations we are having at each of these shows. So we're actually packing our booth with developers who know what they're talking about in Kubernetes. So do come by, and again, happy to talk about how we do our DevOps in-house. Happy to talk about how we are running our service using an EKS cluster in the cloud. So we're happy to share our experiences as well. And we've got our lead DevOps engineer, a lead architect, lead cloud architect are all there, and we can address these questions. And finally, I think we're also going to have some scooter giveaways. The show is a long and a large footprint compared to Valencia. There's a lot of walking to do. And so we're giving up scooters at the show. And a lucky winner, certainly not everybody that comes into the booth, but at least there is one picked every day. And you can walk around the show in an e-scooter as opposed to walking, because by day 3, I know your legs hurt and need a scooter more than anything.
I'm looking forward to meeting you in person once again at the event, but I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Swapnil. Thanks for having us, and look forward to meeting you at KubeCon.